Hi, welcome to part 2 of deploying the Spring Contact application on VMware vFabric Application Director version 5.0. This time we're going to take our original contact application and iterate on it. We're going to take the in-memory database and change its Spring profile to point to vPostgres on an external node. So we'll walk through configuring that. To start off with, we're on our contact application page. And here's our current old 1.0 application version. Let's look at the blueprint really quick to refresh everyone's memory. So it's just a single node with a TC server and the contact web app defined on it. I'm going to click on the shortcut here to copy the application. And we'll call this version 1.5. And we'll change the description to Alright, and we'll save that. Now we have a copy of the version 1.0 and we'll go into its blueprint. We're going to change it from a single node into a node array or a clustered node. And for now we'll leave the size set to 1. But you can have this set as many as you want. Now I'm going to take a Red Hat 64-bit node and I'm going to add that to the screen and we'll add vPostgres to it. So I'll change this node name to DB. I'm going to add a SQL script to it. And we'll call this createDB. And then we have some properties we'll want to add to it in a script. We'll use this to create the database and then also initialize it with the default schema. This is a command property with a reference to the location of where the pSQL command will be installed. This is our create database reference, and we'll change that to content. We're going to download this and then we'll be able to run it. So we have 3 contents we're going to add. The first one was for creating the database. This one is the main schema. Right, there we go. So we have our 3 files, like I said. So this one will create the database and the default user for our app. This is the main custom schema, and then this is the Spring Security schema that's distributed with Spring Security. So I kept them separate. Now we'll go ahead and make a script. So I have that already. We'll use configure. Now we have it that we run the pSQL command with the default Postgres user, and we run create database, schema, and security schema. Okay, that's it for this part of the app. Now we'll need to edit the contact web app to change to use the Postgres Spring profile, and also to create a properties file where it will store the JDBC URL created so it can reference the DB. And we'll want to draw a dependency between the contact web app and the database. So this will guarantee in our execution plan that the contact web app will not finish and have the server start up before Postgres and the database are created for it so it can connect. Okay, so we're going to add to the WAR configuration 2 properties. One is the Postgres IP, and we are going to use another option we haven't used so far. So you can have the different types, you can have static values for them, and now you can bind to other properties within the blueprint. So we want to connect to the DB IP address right here. So now whatever IP address is assigned to the database, we'll get a reference to that so we can connect to it. And we have one other property, and that is we'll want the instance dir for self vFabric TC server. Okay, here's our 2 newly added properties. Now we're going to add to the installation of the WAR right before the server's restarted. We're adding our modifications to the script. We could add it later, but there's no reason for the WAR to start in in-memory mode and then switch back again. So this is where we started. So we're going to change the directory of where TC server binary is located for our particular instance. Then we're going to write out to that directory the contact app.properties file. Our application contact is configured that any properties file that's contact * properties from wherever the application started will override any default properties like JDBC URLs or anything like that in property files in the class path. So that's a pretty standard feature of Spring, and you'll see here that we take the JDBC URL and we have it equal to JDBC:PostgreSQL, and then for the IP address we use the variable that we just created, and we have the default port, which we also could have created a variable for, and then we're having it reference the contact database that we just created. I didn't show the scripts for that. And then we're echoing created contact app.properties file, so we'll have that in our logs if anything goes wrong, or at least you'll know that you've reached that point. Now the second part is we're taking our setenv.sh file in TC server, and we're just concatenating to the end of it, and this is the setenv file for our particular instance of TC server. We're adding JVM ops as an option, which TC server supports and will use, and we're setting a minimal memory and a max memory in our perm size, so we're increasing the memory, which is also a pretty standard option to want to do, especially for a large production application. And we're also setting our Catalina ops, which will get passed in as the Java ops to our application, and we're setting the default Spring Profiles system property. So spring.profiles.active equals PostgreSQL. So this will activate our PostgreSQL Spring profile as opposed to the default one, which starts up and uses HSQLDB. Alright, I just was confirming that that's all there is. So this is the entire modification now to have an external database run with our application. Just clicking on save, and then we'll go ahead and deploy it to vCloud. I'm creating a new profile. The old ones don't copy over, they stay per application version. I'm picking DWDC, clicking on Map Details. And you see again that our logical templates are being mapped to physical ones, and we just have one for each. So there's a CentOS 5.6 32-bit one and a Red Hat 64-bit one. And we're using Red Hat for the DB because that's what vPostgres SQL supports. That's the only OS that service supports. And then here in the logical networks, we'll again just choose the first one. And this is our physical network here that we'll use. And then we'll click on Next, and I'll just show that now we have two nodes. So we have a contact app and a database that we could modify, and we also have our two different services. And we have our contact web app again, and now we also have a reference to our create DB SQL script. So if we were deploying this to EC2 in a different deployment profile, we'd be able to override at this point and reference S3 locations for these files. Right, great. So now you'll see that the contact app, since we made it a clustered node, shows that there's a node array size of 1. And then also here's our database. And this shows the actual flow of the installation. So Postgres will install, configure, start, and our create DB script configure will run. And then the next thing is that this can continue. So you'll see when the execution plan actually runs during the deployment, this node will get configured first, and then this one will run. So that by the time the contact web app goes to restart, trying to point to this database, everything's already configured for it based on this order. And opposed to the blueprint where the dependencies point on what you depend on, this is showing what comes next in the flow since it's more of a sequence. All right, and here's our review page again that we can see everything. Here's all the different properties that were configured. And I'm going to click on deploy. As previously in the deployment, you can see that we have a task detail section. You can review the blueprint again, the VM details where we'll see both of our nodes come up, and we'll see the execution plan. So we're just waiting for the provisioning and deployment to start, and then we'll see the IPs resolve. And then once all the VMs are completely provisioned, the execution plan will start running. You see that both IP addresses have been resolved now, and the databases are still finalizing their provisioning. Once they're complete, the execution plan will start running. The database VM is already provisioned, and we're just waiting for the contact app to finish. And you can see that this is there's only one node of this configured, and we could run a scale out on this and increase the number of nodes. I'm going to expand this so we can just watch it from the execution plan. As soon as the contact app node is finished provisioning, it'll start installing TC server. Since the database node is already completed, it's actually already completely finished its installation and created our database. If for some reason the contact app had run first, it would have actually waited